Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic creator and artist Ben Lacy, who's the man behind Shark of War. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I am very excited because I love this concept of the comic. I think that it is very 80s vibe and it's sort of sci-fi. It's got that Jaws meets RoboCop feel to it. And I know that you have a Kickstarter going on for the third issue of Shark of War. But
Right.
before we get into that, I do want to cover what is Shark of War for those who haven't heard of it.
Well, Shark of War is basically, it is Jaws meets RoboCop. It's Jaws if the shark were the hero. It's RoboCop if the cop were a shark. Basically, it takes off from a few real instances where the military was trying to weaponize sea life at different points in time, and the idea is that they found this gigantic great white shark, and they've taken him and they have modified him into basically a cyborg shark. And due to an act of sabotage, he winds up escaping, but he's been programmed to follow and obey American law, and he has an artificial intelligence implanted in him that's trying to get him to do that. So he basically goes off and starts a one shark war on crime along the Atlantic seaboard, which obviously hacks off some powerful criminal cartels who decide they have to stop him. And the only way they can stop him, since he's bulletproof and has his own weaponry, is to hire one of his co-creators to make a weapon to stop him. And that's kind of where the story really takes off, is this battle between his co-creator and the criminal elements that want to stop him. And we're really focused on, one thing that I think is unique about it is there's been a lot of shark fiction, but the shark is always the monster, the creature, the thing that has to be stopped. In this case, your rooting interest is the shark. You will be on his side. You're following him. He's the point of view character. I try to, visualize what an intelligent shark might think like, which isn't quite human, but, it's not shark because he's smarter than your regular shark now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going on with this, and we're going to dive into some of it, and you've alluded to some of it too. But one of the things I do want to talk about before all this is you're the artist on it, and you are not coming from the same traditional art realm that, necessarily, and we were speaking before from a Zenescope interior artist from, where a lot of this is done on the computer, and you use a lot of software and engineering tools. And so what is that like to enter that? That's a whole different ball game.
My real life job is I'm an engineer, so I do a lot of computer modeling and computer work in my real life job. So I know how to do computer work, but as an artist, I can barely draw a straight line without the computer to help me. So basically, what I've done is I've used some computer modeling programs and some digital art programs to basically try and make computerized art that still has a comic book feel to it. So obviously it's not going to look like, some of the artwork Zenescope has, and it's going to be a little rougher for some people, but I think you can follow the story very easily, and it captures what what the story is, I think, very well.
And even to talk about that, because you are doing something that is different, and you're breaking, I guess, the mold and the excuse now. And so now everybody who comes after you on my show has no excuse for not creating art. And so moving forward, everybody has to blame you for that.
Well, I hope they don't, because some of them are my friends, but in the community. But yeah, I'm trying to do this, for now myself, because I didn't know at the time any artists or anything like that. I'm more plugged in now, and actually, this is the first issue where I brought in, some more traditional artists to do variant covers. In fact, I think Greg Bo Watson, one of the artists I have doing one of the covers, I think he does some of that, that art you see in some of those, kind of comic, the more traditional art you really see in some of the comic books, like the Grimm fairy tale thing and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I still think this is great. And I also think I like different. I like
Yeah.
different art. I like the fact that, you know, you can do computerized art and
Right.
digital art, but then we could also have those really nice, clean interior work stuff, and you could have those photorealistic positions as well in art. And the fact that we have this gigantic foray, because I read the first issue. You get the first issue for free every
Right.
and I found that, oh man, it's just a different art style. I didn't even think it was computerized. And if you
Right.
didn't tell me it was computerized, I wouldn't have even made the assumption. I would have said, oh, this is just a different art style to go along this idea. And when I was reading it, and then I didn't even realize it until I saw the opening page that you're the artist on it too. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, this is super interesting. So I do want to bring that up because I think that it adds to the story. It gives it a different feel. And I love the fact that, you know, we have this crazy 80s vibe comic that has art that, you know, not to be mean, but it is a little bit 80s to some degree as well. And so I just think it's great. I think that whether it was intentional or not, it fits super well.
Well, I mean, I did a lot of work, you know, because I've seen computer rendered comic books before, and they can be very stiff, and you know, if they're too photorealistic, and you see a comic book page that's photorealistic in the way some computerized movies are photorealistic, it looks really odd. So I did a lot of work to try and turn that more toward a comic book, you know, more classic comic book style, while still using it to my advantage. In fact, if you get that first issue, which, like you said, is free, there's an extra in the digital extras explaining how I do the art in detail. For anybody who really wants to understand the computer programs and how I redo them to make it look more real, more comic book style.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, people can read that, and it is very insightful. And we said I read it, and I found that entire process super interesting. But I want to dive into some of this story and what's going
Sure.
on and everything in between, because obviously we got a shark who was captured. Supposedly, the military wanted to do something with this shark and have it so that it could be used as a weapon and that it can make certain decisions long haul out without having to consult. And well, you know, they sort of capture a beat up shark. They pretty much wrap the shark's innards, I guess, in titanium. And then what they do is that they put, you know, I guess an artificial liver in it, and then that's connected to convert food into shark oil. That's then converted into fuel. They attach a bunch of weapons, and we got all this crazy science stuff in there. Obviously, I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently sharks have very hollow brains. And so,
yeah, I did some research, and like I said, there's another extra in the first issue where it explains some of the science behind it. Sharks have a very large liver to create a lot of oil, which they use for buoyancy, but oil is a fuel, and you can convert it into something more closely related to jet fuel. So that's kind of the science behind that. And the shark does have a hollowish brain. It doesn't have a huge brain, but it has a lot of hollow spaces. So some of the story is how they basically fill that space with more brain, so the shark can be smarter.
and so to even build this out, because here we have what I guess is some sci-fi element that sort of can be probable, and it's not completely out of the bounds, and it's not, you know, unrealistic if you think. Then obviously with medical advances, and probably within the next 10 years, if not sooner, you know, I'm not saying we're going to go wrap a shark in titanium and then send it out with rocket launchers on its side and make it control the Atlantic border, but this isn't so far out of bounds in today's society. So what was that like, really building that up? Because I can buy into this concept.
Well, there's two things. I mean, there's the turning the fuel into jet fuel. That's doable, though not on a shark scale. You'd need a much larger plant to do it. The other thing, though, I wanted to explore, and I think I start to get into it more in issues 3, and then in 4, is, you know, a lot of it's about, you know, interaction between man, or in this case shark, and artificial intelligence. Because the shark has, you know, a very symbiotic in some kind of odd couple relationship with the computer that's been implanted in his brain, where they're basically having, arguments at different times. And I think that, from a more realistic view, that, a lot of times in fiction, when you have, artificial intelligence, it's like the Terminator or, the Matrix. The artificial intelligence turns on us, and it tries to kill us or enslave us or otherwise destroy us. In this, the relationship is much more symbiotic. The man and the shark and the human, the shark and the artificial intelligence are working together in a more symbiotic relationship, which I think is probably more realistic. As we're going forward here, you see people and artificial intelligence starting to get a little closer, as our smartphones get a little smarter, as now we're starting to embed AI into glasses and into clothing. And, at some point, somebody's going to try and embed something in their brain. That person will probably die, but the 100th person will probably survive, and we'll see people with some kind of a chip in their heads to help them, surf the internet faster and do math faster and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something very interesting where we have this scenario and this circumstance where the shark and the AI are sort of coming to a logical head.
Right.
Making determinations, just not for I guess a bit of a spoiler is that there's a sabotage that becomes the shark's main enemy.
Right.
And, there's a whole, I guess, issue where it's like, okay, we have to obey orders. This person's not happening. And then they logically, the AI and the shark logically reach a conclusion that the person who was sabotaging is now the new enemy and has to be stopped.
Right.
And that kind of kicks off an entire circumstance where now the shark's new mission, as it was sort of programmed and the AI was meant to do, is sort of to hit that into point where now that kind of drives the shark. And that seems very different than, just a pre-programmed protocol where there is logic and those protocols are flexible to some degree with the shark. And that in certain circumstances, and even the opening scene where the shark is dealing with a drug cartel and it spots two people that aren't shooting at the shark. So the shark has to go after them. It seems to be that like there's judgment call and logic here, and I think that makes the story real versus having it just be like there's a shark and it's going to kill everything in sight.
Yeah. The shark is not, sharks in real life don't go out of their way to kill people. In fact, they rarely even bother people, and usually if they do, it's either an accident or the human actually initiated the encounter. So it's very rare when humans get killed by a shark. So they're not intentionally going after, but the shark in this case has been programmed to enforce the law, and at the same time, it's also been programmed to obey its creators. And it realizes, after some debate, that one of its creators has gone off the rail, and that it no longer should obey that one, and it instead goes off with the intent that it will try to find them, but it will also look for other criminals. And then there's a kind of a humorous point in that first issue where, in going off and looking for criminals, the criminals it finds most is drug smugglers again and again and again, which I think is probably realistic for what you would find in terms of crime. And that starts hitting at the finances of a large criminal cartel.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that the enemy in this entire circumstance is a criminal cartel, and it's not, another government, it's not the U.S. government, and it's that circumstance where it's like now they're dealing with an actual bad group of people out in the open sea, and in maritime law is also in effect to some degree, because for those who don't know, I think it's 3 miles and 12 miles.
Yeah.
Within 3 miles and even 9 miles even further out, if you're born 3 miles into the U.S.'s borders, you're a U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. typically patrols about 12 miles out as far as the Coast Guard goes for the most part. And then the U.S. military does what the U.S. military does out in the middle of the ocean with some very powerful submarines. And I'm going to leave it at that. But anyhow, this shark has a lot of flexibility under U.S. maritime law.
Right.
And so it's super interesting even with that when it's going after cartels, and even more so when it's going after them within the 3-mile coastline of the U.S. And so I think that is something that is super interesting just in that realm of how you set up that enemy. And well, they're pissed because when you're costing people money, they start acting in a very different fashion.
Well, what I wanted to do, I mean, I created a fictional country called Centralia, which is between the United States and South America. And basically, you know, there are real Central American countries right now that are having significant issues with, you know, criminal cartels.
COVID almost affected their business. Their bottom line is clearly affected by COVID.
Yeah. Well, they've also, I mean, they have huge authority in some of those countries. And so but I didn't want to use a real country, but I wanted to kind of, you know, hint at that. So I created a fictional country, created a fictional cartel, though the name is inspired by the name of a real cartel, whose name I won't mention, so then I kind of created a leadership hierarchy for that, and they're basically deciding to go after him.
Yeah, and so now this shark causes them problems, and now they wind up going to go get one of the creators who tried to kill this shark, and we don't know exactly why this person tried to, you know, destroy this shark. And I don't know if the shark has a name yet, but
the shark is called its code name is USS Nasher, GWS 26, I think, Great White Shark 26. I use the U.S. military ship naming convention, which would be like United States ship, California CGN 45, which is Nuclear Coast Guard ship 45. So for the shark, it's USS Nasher, GWS for Great White Shark 26, because they had 25 before him, but they all got killed because they couldn't survive it. And the only reason he survived is he's a much larger than average great white shark.
And so obviously he's costing them business. They wind up going and recruiting this doctor, Dr. Brooke Douglas, and she tried to kill him once. I think this shark knows exactly who she is. And well, she introduces some piranhas that are also cybernetically modified going after him. And I'm not ruining too much because it's sort of on the Kickstarter. And
yeah, so, I explained some of what happens in issue 1 and 2 on the
Kickstarter. You can explain what you need to explain so everybody's caught up here.
Yeah, basically, you know, she had a desire to take the project when she got involved in a different direction than the head of the project did. And she thought there was a more profitable way to go.
More of a drone method.
Yeah, she wanted to basically make drones instead of intelligent weapons that she could mass produce and sell on the open market, which is what she's doing now. And so she decided to basically steal the project. And she killed Nasher, tried to kill Nasher more, not because she wanted to really, but she just wanted to make sure nobody else had the tech. And since she couldn't control him, she figured it was best just to kill him. But she failed in that. He escapes, and now, you know, she's going to try again with these piranha. And in issue 2, you know, without giving too much away, she basically wins. And so issue 3 starts up with, you know, him in a very bad situation, where he is, you know, desperately, mortally wounded, and, you know, that's where issue 3 takes off. And she, on the other hand, and the criminal cartel she's working for have basically decided now that they are so powerful, they're even going to take on the U.S. military. They thanks to their technological advantage, they basically think they can outdo the U.S. and really take over, and not even be a criminal cartel, but basically be, you know, a power.
And this shark, to sort of also fill it in the first issue, he rescues a kid on this boat, more or less from this cartel to some degree. And now he is sort of goes and I guess beaches up to around to that kid. And that's also sort of where, you know, this shark's in with this orphan kid who's his only friend in the entire world as well. And that's kind of I guess where we get the pivot of what's about to happen next,
right?
In between, and it's very interesting, even how we have this shark who understands, and to even get part of the humor side, he says, "I'm hungry," and so he'll eat a bad guy, but then he won't eat somebody who didn't cause him harm. And it's very much in the character of sharks to some degree, where it's that entire thing too. And so that's kind of where I think issue 3 kind of kicks up, is that he's beached, sort of mortally wounded in the fight, and then now it's what happens next with his orphan kid, I guess his older sibling or sister, and they're in enemy territory, for lack of a better word.
Right. They're poor people who live in this country, who are, they're downtrodden by the circumstances, and they're debating whether to help him or not. And that's kind of where it goes. The young boy wants to help him, obviously, but he needs his older sister's help too. So, the reason he did not eat him, because he had no reason to eat him when he first encountered him. But there was one of the humorous parts of the book, is that he had a debate about whether to save him, because he's a shark. He doesn't have human morality. So when he saw the boy drowning, his first thought was, well, do I really care? And he went through quite a discussion with the artificial intelligence whether it's worth his while to bother to save this kid. And that was one of the, I try to have some black humor in it, and that was kind of one of the points of humor, is the debate over whether they should save this boy, which they did do. But
and I also, even going beyond the humor, I also think, though, that it reminds that this is still an animal.
Right. Yeah. I definitely want to, I want to have it be intelligent, but I want to try and have people, remember, he's not a human. He's not an anthropomorphic. He's not a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle or something, or a Thundercat. He's not a human in turtle or tiger form. He's a shark who's intelligent. So his thoughts and his actions are based on that, not based on human morality or human conscience.
And also, I would even add that it's a living weapon.
Right.
Meaning that this is a weapon. This is not, it's a shark, it's a weapon. It clearly can do damage, and it can clearly do certain things if it wanted to do it. And while it might have its programs is constantly changing, and there is this complete scenario where AI evolves.
Right.
And so obviously this is a living, breathing weapon, much like a human is with a gun to some degree, where decisions can be made. Obviously, this, though, has, what are capabilities. So it's super interesting, just even on that concept. Right. And I don't know if you're going to be going beyond issue 4, but
I'm going to go at least 5 issues, because that will complete the first story arc, and it'll be set up for future issues potentially, but there'll be at least 5 issues. And if people like it enough, I'll continue beyond that.
Because there's just a lot of directions it can go.
Right.
5, and there's like 19 different ways it could go, and we haven't even gone into warmer waters yet.
Right. I wanted to, like I said, if it goes real well, I wanted to even create an all ages version of the story where, a spin-off that's an all ages title where the shark isn't actually eating people. He's more of a appropriate for younger children, but that'll have to wait and see. And I've done a couple of short stories too that that may get published in some upcoming anthologies as well. Spin-off stories. Like one of them takes place in issue 1 before he escapes, where the U.S. military sends him off to try and find an airplane that's crashed in the ocean, and they can't find it, but they figure maybe he can. And so that's a short story. I'm hoping that will be published soon in an anthology.
And so there's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, you can definitely go more of an all ages. You could go mission books.
Right.
I think is something that could be out there. And then also you could probably go, and then you could probably have a whole different spin-off of a West Coast version of this, which I think would be super fascinating, or even what happens 20 years after the fact,
right?
Or this shark goes finds love and have an entire bounty on Facebook. So I'm just throwing out ideas out here. So if any of these things get done, we know it came from me first.
Okay.
But I'm not going to press too hard on what happens.
Right.
Obviously, to pick up the issue, it's available. Obviously, you can back it on Kickstarter. I think you're pretty close to getting funded.
I'm like at 93%. I need like $70 to be funded. So I hope people will see that. Your viewers will see this and check it out. My thing here, sharkofwar.bitingcomics.com, takes you directly to Kickstarter, and I'm really trying to make it. One thing I always think about is the price of Kickstarters for the customer, and I'm really trying to be an affordable point where you're getting. I can't charge as low as Marvel Comics can, because I can't print an issue for 50 cents, but I try to give extra value. For example, in all my tiers, include one thing I have that's going to be in issue 3 in the digital version, and if I do well enough, I'll put it in the print version, is my guide for how to avoid a shark attack, using University of Florida Museum of History's guidance. I've created short little comic strips of what you should do to minimize your chances of getting attacked by a shark, which are very low. And I tell people that, but I've had so many people come up to me and say, since I saw Jaws back in 1974, I've been terrified to go into the ocean. My first thought was, geez, it's been 50 years and you're terrified to go in the ocean still. That's kind of sad. But then I thought, well, maybe I should create something that will help people feel a little more comfortable in the ocean by telling them how they can, reduce their chances to the minimum possible level.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because Kickstarter is complicated, where I backed Kickstarters that were very reasonable. Mm-hmm. All things considering, for an indie book, it wasn't going to break my bank. And then I backed things where it's like $15 for a single issue and then like $6 shipping. And I hate to break it, and I understand that you're not Marvel, you're not DC, but I have legitimately gone on certain comic websites that sell me directly, and that is 10 comic books. Mm-hmm. I know what I'm getting. And so obviously being affordable, but also being able to print it and also being able to have a little bit of flexibility, I think, is a balancing act. And I think sometimes people forget, especially, and some of these people are my friends, and if they don't want to be my friend after I just said that, that's perfectly fine here. I will live with that, guilt, but it is expensive to spend $21 on a Kickstarter for a single issue.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And and that's why my single issue for issue 3 is $12, which includes free US shipping. You also get the digital versions of issue 1 through 3. You get a refrigerator magnet, and if we make stretch goals, there'll probably be stickers and bookmarks too. So $12 is obviously more than the 4 or 5 you'd spend on a Marvel comic book, but I'm throwing in extras. I have shipping and printing costs, and I'm giving an personalized experience that you're not getting from Marvel. Like I said, for example, that guide to how to avoid a shark attack or something like that, is as well as some of the digital extras, like the science behind it and how I do the art and things like that really expand on the book.
See, I don't think $12 is an excessive price point. I think $10 to $12 is typically reasonable. It's when you start getting into 15, you might say, well, that's only $3 more. But then when I'm also having to pay shipping, all of a sudden, that's when we start getting into.
That's why I include shipping. For U.S. people, unfortunately, overseas is so expensive that I can understand why I have very few non-digital overseas backers, because once you send a book to overseas, your shipping cost is going to be $15 to $20, even $25 to like Australia. So you just can't not charge a big hit for shipping.
Yeah, I mean, usually Canada is pretty good as far as that, but even then,
even there, the $12 or $13 for
it gets expensive, because I just ordered something from Canada and the shipping was even with the price difference, because I think the dollar is stronger and it might be closer right now, but even still, it gets expensive very, very quickly in a very, very fast way as well. So I don't have a problem dropping $12 for a issue. So when we get to 15, especially because other Kickstarters, they'll charge 25 for a variant. And
yeah, I do charge more for my variants. I'm not gonna pretend I have a variant. I always do a Jaws spin-off spoof cover, and I charge more for that. And this time I brought in some some guest artists, and I charge more for that because it costs, you pay for that artwork, and and I'm not doing a huge print run, so I do charge more, and that's for people that want something special. That's it. But if you just want the base book, $12, or if you just want the digital editions of all 3 books, that's $8. So for $4 more, you're getting you're getting all the digital editions and the book, and which is basically that $4 is less than the cost of shipping and printing for me. But I really want people to have a hard copy of my book, because my feeling, I back a lot of Kickstarters and Indiegogos myself, and I get digital editions all the time, and they sit on my hard drive, and I never look at them. But I know if people get the hard copy, more than likely they're going to read the book, because that's what I do. So I'm willing to discount people just to get people to get my hard copy of my book. I'm willing not to mark it up too much, because I really want them to have the hard copy, hoping they'll read it, because I think if people read it, they'll like it.
So I am the exact opposite, where I love when creators, because I back a bunch of projects and I've started backing a lot more, except the month of March, I sort of took a break. Right. So I had a very, very excessive February. But one of the things that I love is when I get a digital copy and I get a physical copy.
Right.
I'm a comic collector, I'm a comic seller, and I'm both. And I like reading a lot of comics. I just got a subscription to Comixology, and I love it. It's probably one of the best things I bought this entire year. Every month, because I go through at least 6 or 7 graphic novels, like on a Saturday.
Right.
When I'm not, in a day, I legitimately sit and read on my iPad. And so now I'm reading a lot of comics, and so I love reading digital because I get it right on my iPad, and I could just scroll through it, and I love it. But I also like staring at a hard copy and smelling like the hard copy and having it. But I do read digitally a lot more than I read physical copies, because it's just cleaner for me. And I also like collecting cool covers. And so I'm curious how you feel about digital. And I think you answered part of it, because
I don't mind digital if it's like free, or very cheap, because if I'm getting either through Comixology or through the library system, the digital copy or something like that, or on Amazon, or sometimes from Kickstarter, the digital copy. But my preference wise is I'd much prefer to read a hard copy of the comic book. Maybe it's because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we didn't do things on tablets and stuff like that. But I think it's cleaner to look at. Usually you can hold it close, hold it far. Whereas when it's on a tablet, sometimes you got to like scroll in to see it well, or zoom in to get the picture. I don't really like that. Sometimes the color doesn't come through right. But yeah, I much prefer hard copy, and I think people reading it. A lot of us get these Kickstarter downloads, and we download it to our computer, and it just sits there. Whereas if somebody hands you it in the mail and it's sitting on your table, you're gonna look at it.
So I'm just curious. Even I understand the personal preference, but I'm curious even from the business preference, because obviously COVID, and we're going to talk about COVID in a little bit, but COVID shut down a lot of international ability to sell comics. There are still countries that are starting to open up their mail, but for a good 6 months in 2020, Argentina was not accepting any packages into their country, which is crazy.
Yeah,
that has never happened in Argentina before. So you couldn't physically send a book to Argentina. And the only reason why I know this is I had somebody on Kickstarter who tried to send one, and like the package legitimately got rejected, which is insane. if you think about it, because it's a problem I would never think about. So, and then obviously international shipping is also very expensive, as we were speaking about. And so I feel with digital, and I felt this way 2 years ago, and there was a big debate, and I'm sure you've seen part of it on a lot of these Facebook groups, where a bunch of people saying, I don't prioritize digital. And I was saying, oh, you guys seem moronic, because there's a lot of money to be made in digital. Because if your book is $3 or $4 or $5 to back digital, and I don't know anything about your book, I'm willing to take a $5 risk. And then if I like it, I'm going to be now coming back for your next Kickstarter. But versus, especially when a book is 15, 16, 20 bucks. And so, and I backed a bunch of Kickstarters digitally that I had no idea, and I took a high flyer because their digital position was $5. And I'm like, man, this is really good. I wish I backed the physical. And so,
I mean, I definitely always have a digital. In fact, like I said, my digital copy will usually have extras that I'm not going to put in the print book, like written stuff and extra art and stuff like that I'm not going to print out. So I definitely want to have that digital option for people. And some people are maybe they will read it. I'm just going somewhat by my own experience and my suspicion that people don't always look at the digital version when I send them out, but everybody looks at the physical one when it arrives in their mail, because they have no choice, especially since they get it signed and stuff like that, because I sign the books if people want them signed. My experience with the COVID situation, I did my first Kickstarter. I finished my first issue in March, and in February of last year. I launched a Kickstarter for that issue in late February through March. So as everything was shutting down, I was sending off my first issue. And I had a couple backers in like Australia and Spain, and it took at least 2 or 3 months for them to get their copy. I was kind of panicked about it, because I felt, I wanted them to get it sooner. They paid a lot extra for that delivery, because I have to charge extra for shipping, for that such a high price. But they did eventually get it, fortunately. So that was a relief. The second Kickstarter, I don't think there was nearly as much, which was in August and September timeframe. Was nearly as much time for the foreign shipments. I think it was a week or two people got their books. So I think the issues with COVID slowing down shipping are probably mostly behind us by now. So hopefully that won't be an issue. But most of my backers anyway that are getting physical copies are US based, just because of the shipping cost, and I accept that. And it's worth mentioning that, another advantage, I'm printing out issues that I'm going to also sell at a con. I went to PowerCon a couple weeks ago. I'm going to go to SC Comic Con in a few weeks, and nobody at Comic-Con will buy a digital issue. You can't say, hey, pay me $5 and get the digital download at Comic-Con. You have to be selling, a hard copy, or I don't think you can sell a digital issue.
It's a much harder sell.
Yeah, I think that would be very hard. People see the book, they get you to sign it, they've had an interaction with you as the artist and writer and stuff, and you can sell your book. But that's going to be it's much easier to do it something at a con, if you have product.
So we're going to talk about PowerCon in a minute here, but I do want to talk about some more of these rewards, because obviously you can get the physical copy of issue 3. You could catch up on all 3 issues that are out there, which is also very cool. So if you read issue 1 for free and you're like, oh man, this is great, this is like right up my alley, I'm an 80s baby. For instance, somebody on my show is called the Retrosexual, or formerly known as the Retrosexual, and he's an 80s, porn star type wrestler.
Whoa.
May or may not be a big deal. Oh man, a bunch of people who know my show know exactly what I'm talking about. And yes, you should be jealous. You should be very jealous. And also the person I interviewed last week has a connection to that person as well. Be very jealous, everybody. But obviously you can catch up on everything of the base covers. You can catch up digitally on everything. And then obviously you got 2 variants or two variant sets. So you get your jaw variant stuff coming out, and obviously we got a third one on that one coming, and then you can catch up on all three of those. And then you have the Greg Bo Watson covers as well. And so what is that like now, adding all these variants? Because I think people on Kickstarter want variants.
And oh yeah, you definitely have to have them. And I think that's helped me this time versus my last, because I did my own variants last time, and I think people liked my Jaws parody covers, but my other variants they weren't that interested in. Whereas Greg Bo Watson does he does pretty girl art, so he did a cover with the heroine Marissa, who's the older sister, with the shark coming up behind her in the background, for people that like that kind of art, which is really cool. And that's actually the Brian Dawson cover.
That's Brian Dawson.
Yeah, Brian Dawson does.
This is the one.
Yeah, this is Greg Bo. Yeah, it's not colored yet. He owes me coloring. I'm hoping he has it done this weekend so I can show that off. But yeah, basically this is the heroine of the Shark of War with the shark coming up behind her. It'll be colored in.
100% honest. I personally like it without any of the colors on, and I'm gonna just state that I like it almost sketched out, and it's pretty cool the way it looks.
Yeah, it does look really nice. I've been showing it on Facebook. I got a lot of people liking it on Facebook. But and if there were interest in just having the black and white version, I might consider printing it that way as well for people that. But I'm expecting his colors to really pop as well. So
I have faith. I'm just saying that I like sketch covers like that.
Yeah.
I like colored versions as well, and I just think it's really cool. And then also, I think this is the Jaw version.
Yeah, this is the Jaws version. I've done 3. I do one every issue. The first one was basically your traditional Jaws poster where the shark is coming up on a woman. Then the second one is the piranha are coming up on the shark. And now the third one, we've completely flipped the script, and the woman is now mocking the shark as he goes down to defeat. So it's kind of following the story as well as is still being true to the style of the poster.
And then also because I missed it, I think this is just the base cover.
Yeah, this is the base cover. So it's kind of the Victoria. I did. You've seen this is another spoof of a comic book classic. The Here Lies the Hero, where he's defeated, dead, and on the cover. And there's been at least 3 or 4 that I found just looking casually. One was Superman dead, one was Spider-Man dead, and using the Here Lies. So that's kind of where I took that from. So
and I'm not gonna lie, I like the way that Brooke is drawn in this entire comic. So
right.
There's a few reasons why, but I'll let everybody make their own conclusions. So I definitely wanted to show that, and I also want to reiterate that you could get all of this stuff. You could get every single cover out there. You get all 3 of the Jaws, all 3 of the other covers, and you get pretty much everything that has been produced in Shark of War for the most part. Also, as you go up the tiers, obviously, I think there's custom prints that you can do, as well as there's like a keychain / bottle opener thing.
Yeah, those are also add-ons too that you can add on at lower tiers. And the keychain, for example, the shark-shaped keychain bottle opener, that's an add-on. It's also that you can add on at any physical tier. You can also buy the Greg Bo Watson inked version of that cover that you were showing, and you can buy the Brian Dawson color, the hand-drawn version of that first cover you showed, where the shark is popping out of the water and attacking. That you showed.
You can buy the original art for this.
Yeah, well, you can buy this is a digital version, but he's also doing a hand-drawn version, one of a kind, that people can buy.
And then there's this one as well.
Yeah, there's the ink that one, basically that in 11 by 17 board art.
Yeah. And one of the things is that if you like that cover and you're a fan of original art, this is one of those cool ways to get original art.
Right.
Next week, and I'm going to just tip it off. I'm going to be speaking about comic book investing at a online con for about 30 minutes. And, this is one of the things I'm going to be talking about is that you never know who's going to be the next, big thing in one of these comic companies or who's going to take off. And having original art is something that's going to be very cool to that degree. So obviously, if you like something, which is what I always say is that you should buy what you like. And then also you say, hey, I just think original art is super cool. Well, this is something that is out there because it is a really cool cover to look at. And it's really not that expensive. I can tell you that I spent about $275 on a commission by a particular artist. And this isn't that far off of this.
Yeah, actually, I'm charging, about what he would charge for a commission. Plus, I'm throwing in all the comic book covers as well. So yeah, it's probably well below what you would pay. So if you like that cover, it's a very fair price too, and it is a cool cover for Shark of War.
So I do want to throw that out there, as well as we also mentioned the stretch goals, which is a magnet and some shark teeth. So,
actually, those aren't stretch goals. Those are everybody who buys the physical copy gets.
I stand corrected.
Huh?
I stand corrected, and now I look even better.
Yeah. Everybody who buys the physical copy gets a magnet. Anybody who spends over $20 gets a half-inch long fossilized shark tooth. And anybody who spends over 30 gets a 3/4 inch, a fossilized shark tooth, which is a good size. Both of those are good size for necklaces. If you want your own shark tooth necklace, that's a great size for it. And they're fossils. And I wanted to make that point because, live shark teeth sometimes are taken unethically. So if you're not finding it yourself on the beach, it's not great to buy them. So that's why I'm using fossils.
Yes, I think that is important, and I hate to be political, but unfortunately, in today's entire circumstance, one wrong step, everybody gets all bent out of shape and everything. So it is important for fossils versus live teeth because let's be realistic, people are not great in society.
I know, and I want to be, this is a pro shark comic book and a pro shark story, so I want to be, make sure people are comfortable that they're getting something that is not exploiting sharks in any way.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think it is important to mention that because I think people need to hear it, and also I think that now if somebody reads something, and you could easily refer them to this. If it gets taken out of context, it's super important, especially with how news moves so quickly in society as of lately. But anyhow, I want to back out of Shark of War, and I want to talk about Powered Con. Now, I don't know much about this con in particular. Last con I went to was a while ago. I mean, it's been over a year. I am not thrilled with the con scene, but that is a different discussion collectively. But obviously, you're down, I think, in South Carolina, right?
Right.
And so, yeah.
I got the first issue of Shark of War done just in time for my hometown Comic-Con. And of course, they closed down my hometown Comic-Con just before I was ready to go. So, I've been waiting for a while to take my books to a con. And this is the first con, PowerCon, which is in Florence, South Carolina. It was the first con that was open that I could go to. So I was excited to go to it. I masked up and
let's talk about this because what did it look like? Because I've been talking about this and this entire podcast, Facebook Live, and now I'm on Twitch and I'm on YouTube streaming as well. This is all built out of the fact that cons were shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, and I've been speaking to people and I have my opinion where big money is going to dictate what exactly happens with the celebrities and everybody in between.
Right.
And so how was it set up? How big is Powered Con? What was the deal with celebrities, if there were any, or was it more just comic oriented?
It was set up. like a fairly like a a con is. It was in the convention center. Florence isn't a huge city, and the convention center is not a huge convention center, but it's a fairly large space. And it was there was the artist alley section that I was in, of course, and then there was the more traditional vendors who had the booths with the comic books and the toys and the other stuff. The we weren't packed in, but so we were, you were able to stay 6 feet apart from people. But some people weren't trying. Everybody were supposed to wear masks, and most people did. I always had my shark mask on, and my Shark of War mask, also available on my Kickstarter. But yeah, most people were masked, and most people were pretty good. It wasn't hugely crowded, like you see some cons, but there was a steady stream of people walking around. The business was pretty good. There wasn't a lot of celebrities. The only name I knew of was Sergeant Slaughter, the 80s and 90s wrestler, was there. I didn't get a chance to see him. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to go. I wanted to go see him, but I was there by myself, and it was my first con. I didn't want to leave my table, so I was practically locked to my table the whole time. So I didn't get to see him because he was obviously off in the one of the exhibit rooms. But there wasn't much else in the way of celebrities. I've been to cons where they had like the Batmobile and the Scooby Mobile, yeah. Mobile. I didn't see any of that there, so I don't think they had any of that. But otherwise it was a fairly regular con. There were a lot of cosplayers there. And on my my Facebook page, I posted a lot of pictures because they'd all walk by my table, and the coolest ones I'd say, "Hey, can I take a picture?" And they'd of course always say yes. So I got there was a really good Deadpool, a really good Black Widow, and some weird stuff that I had to ask my son what this one Pokemon. This woman dressed up as a Gardarian Weezing or something like that, which is from Pokemon. I had to ask my son what the heck that was because she told me, but I, of course, couldn't remember.
So to even talk about this, because it seems that this is sort of the new norm where things are going, where, because I've been speaking and everybody has a different opinion. We're saying maybe attendance limits has to happen, maybe, more space. People have to remain 6 feet apart. Masks have to be an intricate part, maybe, personal cosplay photos don't have to be taken. And look, maybe, we're backing out of celebrities a little bit in that regard. And maybe, we're backing out a little of the personal touch per se with some of this stuff at cons. And so it seems that this, though, it functioned very well.
It was fairly traditional, I think. And the one I'm supposed to go to in April, which is going to be my hometown con, happening a year after it was supposed to originally happen. They actually had a larger list of celebrities, celebrity artists, writers, 3 or 4 different wrestlers. Jake the Snake Roberts was the biggest name I recognized. Lex Luger was there, going to be there. Some fairly well-known comic book artists type, but not huge names, but they had a much larger guest list. So it should be a bigger convention. My hometown here in Greenville is bigger than Florence, so I expect it to be bigger. And it's a 2-day convention, so they'll have more stuff. But they are limiting capacity to 40%. Normally, you get if you're an artist alley, you get 2 wristbands so you can have 2 people at your table. They're only letting you have 1 person at your table. So that's one change. So they are for now limiting it. By the time I go to that con, I'll have had both my vaccines shot. So, a lot of other people hopefully had their vaccines. So that'll help, I think.
I mean, I'm still waiting for mine to get my first. My parents who
are
old
age here. Advantage of being older.
So my parents, pretty much on Easter weekend and they're older, are going to be getting their second. Mm-hmm. I gotta go figure out when I'm getting mine. And some of my friends are getting theirs. I think their first vaccination on April 25th. and around then, and then they're going to be fully vaccinated by the middle of May, and hopefully I can sort of get into that time spot and be vaccinated before June. Fully would be ideal, but obviously it's a little bit crazy. I live in Connecticut. It's a little bit, roll out slow and stuff's going on.
Dealing with medical
stuff.
Yeah, it's been slow everywhere, I think. Slower than people like, but it's a lot of people to vaccinate, so it's a hard process. But
the 300 million is a large number. 300 plus million people. I think we can give ourselves a year to solve this problem. And it's going to take time. It's just one of those things. And even after, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, because obviously you're now going back to cons. And I'm a strong believer that everybody has to do what they feel is appropriate for them. If you have a little one at home, for instance, and you have a 3-year-old, you may not want to hit the con scene so quickly versus seeing somebody who maybe has a 16-year-old at home. I think
I'd actually be more worried about, if I had, I think they've shown that, some younger kids are very low risk relative. I mean, obviously you don't want to take a risk. You don't have to, but I'd be most worried if I had an older person at home, if you had a parent or somebody like that, or, or if you had somebody with a, compromised health issue. Cause I think a lot of the people, I think the people who hit the hardest are the oldest people and the people with compromised, medical conditions. That you'd really be worried about. But I mean, you got to define your own willingness to take risk. I mean, we take risks all the time. Driving to work, you're taking a risk. But it's a low risk, and you got to decide your comfort with risk level.
So as I've been saying, I think people have to really, as you said, define their own risk position and respond accordingly to how they feel with all that, and even how they behave at a con. I think that's another thing where it's this idea that, well, maybe just say, look, I'll go to a con, but I'm only going to do 1 day versus 2 days.
Right.
Maybe I'm going to go to local cons and not travel to C2E2 if I live in Connecticut because I got to hop on an airplane. And so I think that's where things are going to be heading for the next year or so, is that I think people are going to be definitely staying more local, which is fine because, there's nothing wrong with either or. But where do you think things are heading? Because I think changes have to occur with cons, and I think that we are not going back. And I don't know if you've ever been to New York Comic Con, but it is a zoo. And I've been to Big Apple as well. And when I went to Big Apple,
I've never been to a really big con. I've only been to the smaller cons, and I think they'll probably be fairly similar, especially in like the southern states where, we've had a more, for better or worse, we've had a more lax attitude to some of the restrictions. But I can see places like New York, being, different or shut down for, a couple of years, maybe, even though, they may not realistically have to be that bad, depending on how the vaccine progresses in these.
I don't think we're ever going to have 100,000 person con ever again. I don't think we're going to have 100,000 person football game ever again either. I think that this attitude.
I would bet you in the southern colleges you'll see stadiums packed next year, unless there's another outbreak. When the Clemson Tigers are playing down here, there are going to be 80,000 people in the stadium. I'll bet, unless there's a real outbreak.
I don't know.
Just the way it's going to be. I mean, I could be wrong, but I would be shocked if that doesn't happen.
I think that it's going to take a while, and I think that we're not going to be having 100,000 person cons ever again, because and the reason why I say this is that I think people have become a lot more, conservative in that regard of saying, well, con crud is real. The saying where somebody has the flu at a con, half the con gets it.
I will say that even when the mask mandates go away, when I go to a con, I may still just wear my mask anyway, because I think for stuff like that, the mask, really helps. And I wasn't shaking people's hands. If anybody came up, I kind of, wanted to, there were a couple of people who wanted to shake, and I kind of did, hey, did the elbow bump, because I was like, I mean, I'm not so much just worried about COVID, but I mean the flu or anything else you can pass along too easily at one of these kind of events. So I I think the idea that people could still be wearing masks and stuff like that at these kind of events, years from now, we could be like, more like the Asians, where we're in, Japan and stuff. You go around, even well before this, there would always be people wearing masks. We could be more like that going forward for indefinitely.
For those who don't know, the masks in Japan in particular, a lot of that is actually for politeness to your fellow person.
Oh.
Their culture and their philosophy is that they're wearing a mask because they don't want to spread something to you, and they're being polite to you.
Oh.
And also, they've dealt with SARS, and they kind of have that thing where it's not so much, it's for the betterment. And I think that's a really good thing to some degree, where people wear masks, especially when you have 100,000 people, because statistically something is going to spread, and things that are super infectious. Well, if a mask reduces that by 25% and you have 100,000 people, it's a big number.
Right.
And so I think that's a good thing. I also think even streamlining, things at cons, especially aisles, and actually making that enforceable, where you can only go one direction in an aisle, is a good thing as well. And I just think people being more conscious is going to ultimately be better.
Yeah, I think that, I think stuff like that can be beneficial and probably help the flow and also help, your business. Because most people who come by my table at PowerCon were all going the same way, which kind of made it easy for me to buttonhole them as they walked by. Because anybody who even looked at my table, I'd go like, "Do you like sharks?" And then I'd go into my pitch, And if they said yes, I'd immediately be Shark Awards, Jaws meets RoboCop. It's Jaws if the shark is the hero. It's RoboCop if the cop were a shark. I said it so many times, the women at the next table were like saying, when I went to the bathroom, they were like, "We're going to do your pitch for you because we think we've got it memorized."
That's kind of funny. And so, and even going beyond just cons, because I think what COVID has also proven is that you now need to have an online presence.
Oh yeah.
I think prior to COVID you needed it, but you didn't need it as much. And I think now in COVID, I mean, my brand and Pop Anime Comics has expanded, and my reach has legitimately 10x'd itself in a matter of a year. In 5 days, it's going to be a full year of me doing this, and 120 plus interviews just alone in the last year fully. My brand has 10x'd itself, and I have a much larger online presence. And obviously, I think that you can sell your book to the world. At a con, it's very important to be seen and for people to know you're real. But I also think that Kickstarter and all that social platform stuff has expanded people's ability to sell and then reach more people and everything in between. So obviously, how do you feel about that? Because being at a con is important, but online is so much more important now.
Yeah, you can't do a Kickstarter without an online following. Kickstarter's not going to, it might help bring people to your thing, but you need to already have an online following of some level. You have to have an email list. You have to have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I'm pretty big on Facebook. I'm trying to build up my Facebook page. This is my main focus of my online. And you have to have website. You have to offer digital version previews like I offer issue 1. So there's just no way to do a Kickstarter. I think even cons, you probably still want to have a website, because everybody at the con who bought my book, I was like, "Hey, if you sign up for my email list, I'll send you not only my free digital version of issue 1, I'll send you this paper toy shark template so you can print out and make your own toy shark, and all other stuff." Because everybody who bought my book, I got their email, so which I can add now, and then they'll get my newsletter and my other stuff, and they'll get told about my Kickstarter. Hopefully they like the book enough, maybe they'll consider backing the Kickstarter. So yeah, you have to, I think the people who can afford to go to cons and not have a big online presence are probably, either, commission artists, who are there doing character sketches and stuff. But even they I think, want to have, or getting business through the internet, and, people who are selling toys and comics, and there was tons of people doing that. So I don't know how big an online presence they need for that. But there were, the people who were selling in the regular vendor section, not the artist alley, they may not need as much of an online presence.
I mean, I think they need it even more, honestly, where I think that e-commerce is the future.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you're not online doing something and you're not driving traffic somewhere, you're giving up, 50% business minimum.
Right.
I think that cons are going to become very much not a business driver, but saying, hey, I just need to be seen every once in a while so people know I'm not a robot. And it sounds funny, but I mean, a lot of people know who Paul Green is. There's a joke that's running with Zenoscope and a few other people, including myself, where we joke saying, is Paul Green a real person? Because he's never really been seen. He's in the UK and he only does cons in London. So in the US, I don't think he's ever been to a United States, con, or maybe he came over 15 years ago for one of them for some odd reason or whatnot, or maybe 10 years ago. So he hasn't been seen. Nobody knows what the guy looks like for the most part. And so now it's one of those circumstances where it's a joke. And I think it's important that, if I back your Kickstarter and then I see you at a con, I'm like, oh, no, I see you now. And that's happened to me. I've backed in these projects and certain artists that I've loved, and then I've seen them in person. And I could Google their face and all, but it's good to see somebody in person and have a 5-minute conversation with them. So like, I know they're real. I know now I could attach a face and emotion to them. And I think that's what cons are going to become, not necessarily the driving force in sales. That's what I think at the very least. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right.
I don't know enough really to speculate myself. I like I said, this is the first time I've sold at con. So I was just, basically learning the ropes of doing, personal sales and trying to get my sales pitch down. And when my expectations were totally, going in were a lot different than what they were going out. Because, when I went into the con, I was like, oh, gee, I got these comic books. Everybody at the con, it's a comic book con, is going to want my comic books. And then I came in there and I quickly realized everybody at the con wants toys and they want character art of anime characters, and I got to sell my comic book. So I was selling a lot. It was not like I just walked up and people were coming up to me saying, gimme. So yeah, it was a learning experience for me as my first con. So where it's going to go, I don't have enough experience to even guess. But
and also you didn't get the pre-COVID where you didn't get the networking component of it.
No, I didn't get any of that. I mean, well, I met a couple people, like I said, Greg Bo Watson, the artist that did that one cover, he was there. And there were a couple other people I chatted with briefly, but there was no networking. There were very few other comic book, there were 2 or 3 other indie comic book creator types there, but not a lot, and they weren't in the same space as I was anyway. I'm thinking more of the SC Comic Con coming up, where they seem to be having a lot more artistic guests. Maybe I'll have more chance there. And it's a 2-day con, so.
And also it's COVID, and I think people, while this thing sort of dust settles, and I think even for the next year, I think people are going to be very, very, cautious. Right. And they're not necessarily trying to be rude, but I think people are going to be very cautious. In which that, I get most of my interviews, through online, shooting emails, and I used to get a bunch of stuff at cons where I would hand out my business card, pick up people's stuff, talk to people, and I would network. And I'm not even like having a table or anything. I'm just at the con doing what I got to do. And even now, I think it's going to be complicated to hand a business card. And so I'm actually thinking about QRing my business card and then allowing people to scan. So I drop my phone and then they could just QR scan and then they got my contact information, because to me, that's also something that seems super, super interesting to that point. So
I actually did print off the QR code and had it there on the table, but I wound up just asking people to sign up on a clipboard, or I gave them in when they bought a comic book, I gave everybody who bought a comic book, I put it in the bag, my bookmark, and my bookmark has both my email and my website on it as well. So it's basically like a business card, but it's a bookmark.
So yeah, so I mean, I think that type of stuff is where it's going to be going, and all sorts of stuff in that nature. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. So on that note, I'd like to give you an opportunity to promote yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, lots going on. So where can people find you on social media? You know, I don't know if you have a Twitter. I know you have a Facebook page. Obviously, the Kickstarter. I'm not too sure. Are you on Instagram? Because that's a big place. I don't know if you're on ArtStation or DeviantArt or anything like that.
Nah, I have I have the big three: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So on Facebook, I'm at facebook.com/Shark of War. On Twitter, I'm at BLacy1, BLacy1. At Instagram, I'm at Ben Lacy, BNLACY1. But yeah, I think my biggest focus is now the Facebook Shark of War/Shark of War page, where I post the most of stuff, and I post some video clips and other artwork. But I do post on Instagram and Twitter fairly regularly as well. But I think a lot of people who are shark fans and stuff are on Facebook, so that's where I tend to wind up being the most. I have my website at bitingcomics.com. The main thing there is to sign up and get issue 1 free. I also give out like I mentioned, a template for a paper shark toy, and there's a few other extras I give out for free as well. And then, of course, my Kickstarter, sharkofwar.bitingcomics.com, going through April 1st. I think the morning of April 1st. So like 10 days left. I'd really like people to sign up for it. I've got some cool extras that we've talked about. Plus, I've got some good stretch goals once we meet the regular goal, which I'm close to.
Yeah, and so obviously people should go back that, and I've been saying it for the last year almost, that you have to support indie. One of the things is that, and there's many ways to support indie, I'll add on that, where typically if somebody is an indie comic creator, you should back their Kickstarter. That is probably the best way how to support them. Or if their Kickstarter ended, but you could pre-order their book, you should probably go back and buy their book. Super helpful, whether you could pre-order it off of Kickstarter, or they got a website, or they have something of that nature, you can get it digitally. Obviously, any support is welcomed. So obviously that's something that, you know, you should do if you have the financial means to do it. If you're in a situation though where finances are tough, and look, you know, $5 can make or break the difference right now for a lot of people. And it sounds like a crazy thing to say, and it sounds like hyperbole, but if you're in a situation where legitimately $8 is the difference, please make sure you are taking care of yourself first. Take care of your spouse, your husband, your wife, whoever you're living with, your boyfriend, girlfriend. Please make sure you're okay, they're okay. Make sure you're able to pay your mortgage or your rent. Make sure you have food on your table, electricity, you have internet, you have shelter, water. Make sure if you have an animal in your house, whether it's your dog or your cat, that they're okay as well. Also make sure that you have money for the next month and you're going to be okay. You know, please take care of yourself. If you have kids, make sure they're okay. That is super important. Before you go back any Kickstarter, you know, I made a video on my Facebook page that I'm starting up, and I went through the rules of comic book investing. And the first rule is that, you know, 3-6 months of your necessities covered before you even pick up an investment position. You know, make sure you're out of debt. Also, now, while that might not apply per se to this, you know, please make sure you are financially stable before you go backing anybody's position. Now, if that's the case and you're in a financial rough time, you can sign up for the email list, which is super helpful, and you get the first issue for free, and that is ultra important. And you should be signing up anyway, even if you are backing the Kickstarter, and you're going to get issue 1 anyway with the Kickstarter, because it'll keep you informed on everything that's going on with Shark of War, as well as anytime a Kickstarter is coming out for issue 4, you're going to be notified of that. So obviously you should go to the website, sign up, you get the first issue for free, and you'll be part of the email list so that when the next Kickstarter comes up, and hopefully you'll be out of a rough situation, you could then back that Kickstarter. Also, you should be following on Twitter, Facebook pages, ultra important. You know, following on Instagram, also interacting on those social media platforms, massively important as well. liking, sharing, because you never know who is checking something out.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate when people, share, retweet, do any of that.
It is so important because for algorithm arguments, as well as it definitely, everybody has friends, and you never know, your friend might be into sharks, and they might have an extra $15 to spend, and like, oh man, this is awesome, and you never know who's watching. So it's super important. And so on that note, there's multiple ways to support indie. Obviously, financially is ideal if you have the extra money, and if you're in a situation where you don't, you should then be supporting by sharing and engaging on social media. And anybody who has an email list, you should be signing up for those email lists. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Thanks for having me on. I seem to be having a lot of reverb all of a sudden. Yeah, I appreciate your time. I hope people will at least check it out, sharkawar.biteycomics.com. If you like sharks, if you like RoboCop, if you like Jaws, if you like any of that kind of high action adventure, I think you'll like this story. It not only is a lot of fun, but it has a little more depth, both in its portrayal of its shark hero and in the science fiction concepts that get explored. And like I mentioned, all my comic books have a lot of digital extras in them that'll give you more about the story and the science behind the story and things like that.